I'm Deb.
And I'm Dave. And this is our second video. Last week we did a video for National Recovery Month, and they have 4 kind of topics. So last time we talked about health in recovery. And today the next topic is home, as you can see from Deb's Stenciled Beauty. That would be a great band name, Stenciled Beauty. Home. So, and the idea of dealing with home and your house and your family and relationship. We'll talk a little bit about the time during addiction, but also what it's like in recovery, what it looks like now as we, especially that first phase of recovery, how we had to make some changes and how that impacted us, and a little bit about where we're at today. An addict for about 15 years to prescription painkillers. My drug of choice towards the end was Tramadol, synthetic opioid, so same stuff. And when I kind of finally got caught and finally got clean, we had been operating, our kids especially, we'd been married 15 years by that point. And we had a kid in 7th grade, a kid in 4th or 5th grade, a kid in like 2nd grade, and the kid in kindergarten, something like that, somewhere in that ballpark. Well, you just said it a few minutes ago. I couldn't have told you at all. There was one about this tall, one was about this tall. For 15 years, learned to deal with me either in pain from migraines, which is why I originally took it, which caused you and the kids to have to function a certain way, right?
Yeah.
And then not to mention then the pills, that made me not like violent or crazy because they were opioids. They usually kind of just leveled me out. And so sometimes I would be really disconnected and distant. And then just the conflict that came with that when I lie about it or spend money or stuff like that.
Yeah, a lot of conflict.
So the kids were kind of raised in that. And
talking
about, I was thinking maybe you could talk about, I know that you then had to function a lot of times to care for them in ways when I would be distant, either because of the migraines or the pills.
So things like meals, bedtime, keeping the kids quiet so we could take a nap. Our home sort of managed around the life of someone who was chronically ill. Have someone who's present physically, but really isn't connected to what's happening, whether that is they just can't handle it because it is an added stress, or because really they are actually physically absent. For Dave and for a lot of people who suffer from migraines, it's like, I gotta go lay down in a room and cover my head with a pillow. It was hard. It was hard to keep. It's hard to keep 3 little boys quiet. And so some of the ways of coping with that were, I got really independent from him as far as parenting issues were concerned, because we didn't make a whole lot of decisions together because he wasn't present, either mentally present or physically present to help make those decisions. So that was something that needed to change a little bit when he suddenly now is present and active and
having opinions
and ideas and thoughts, and he was suddenly there. And that is still, honestly, probably because we laid such a foundation of me being the boss-ish, that was a
joke. She's not bossy. But having to make some decisions by herself, suddenly now you interject this. And I didn't even know how to do that. I was stunted. Those 15 years, like there's this emotional, spiritual stunting and that goes on. And so stuff that maybe you deal with when your kids are 3, we were dealing with when they're 15.
Yeah.
Where I would think to assert myself, I would be more of like the elephant trumpeting at the herd rather than coming in and being a part of the team, trying to work that out. So there was a lot that you were doing to maintain the home on your own, and not to mention just kind of low level tension kind of stuff was just constant. And so when I finally got caught the final time, we were working at a Christian camp, so we were living there. That was my job, and it was like 90% of my ministry, and our world kind of collapsed. But the cool thing in that moment, not only did I get caught and have to get fired, but it was out in the open. There was no more keeping it a secret. And we made the decision that if everyone's going to know, we got it, even though the kids are young, we're going to tell them.
Right.
And so I'll try not to get choked up. But so our daughter was 13, I think. And, she was, I remember her asking you, are you going to get divorced?
Yeah.
So we told her.
I mean, they had questions. They're not done. You
Yeah.
know, they can see it all.
And then the two littlest boys, I had to sit them down, and they don't really understand. I had explained addiction, and I explained that I had lied about it and I was taking pills, and they're both like, can't you just tell them you're sorry? And yeah,
That's hard.
I had to say, I have said I'm sorry, but no, this is the right thing. And so but the point of that was we needed to tell them. And so that's been a thing that has been a characteristic that I think there was a characteristic before in addiction. It's all about secrets and lies.
Yeah.
And we made the choice that we're going to be all about transparency and not everything. I mean, we don't tell kids, but as much as possible, we're going to tell them. And so they knew about it.
And this was just for us. We decided we couldn't hide all of that, and we were just going to make it worse to hide it. I mean, there are some things that we definitely kept behind closed doors. Yep. Really, because there's a lot of anger there, honestly, and that stuff. There's no need for the kids to see all of that. But I couldn't spare them anymore from being hurt. And so it hurt them that we lost our home. There were things that they were going through that it would not have helped anything for us to pretend like, oh yeah, let's go on this adventure. We're having a good time now. Because we had done that before. Yeah. And so, so they were old enough that we couldn't do that. Yeah. But some of the things, and that I will say now, looking back, 10, 11 years later, that was a good thing for us to do with our kids, to be as honest as we possibly could.
So in 11 years since, we had to make a lot of new routines.
Yeah.
And so besides just the philosophy of openness, and we wanted to kind of share with them. So like when we went there were recovery meetings that we would go together, and for a while we brought them, and they went into kids, they had the kids program, and then as they got older, sometimes they were like the babysitters for the kids group, for the recovery group. So that was part of they understood that language, they understood that concept. So recovery became part of our thing. And then as we talked about helping other people who need help, and that when they got into the teenage years has been fantastic. I always say, like, hey, if you ever have a friend that's struggling, you can be a person that gets it. Yeah. And that we can offer help. And that's been a pretty cool thing. Well, though, right at the beginning was, for me, I felt like the only way to earn back trust, not only from you, but from the kids and from community. One, we decided to stay in the same town, small town. We decided this is where our support is.
And a lot of that was because of the kids, because their lives were disrupted enough as it was, that it was important to us for them to stay in the same school and just continue on, to have one thing in their life that stay in the same church, stay in the same school. So at least that's consistent. And then I went for about 2 years where I never went anywhere alone. And so a lot of times the kids were my little wingmen, like if I need to run to the store, because in the past, when as an addict, those would be the moments I would sneak off to try and get pills. And so just to prove that, we decided I need to be over the top. And so, I went to work. Deb would drop me off at work, and I had to actually physically clock in and clock out so she would know and then pick me up. That and also you kept every receipt too. So that was something else that changed, is that financially we had to do all kinds of things. I think we went through a couple of times where Dave wasn't on our bank account, and so that was all me, and I kept close watch on it. And this was Dave's choice to be accountable in these areas.
Well, it wasn't like you were the cop.
Right. But it was just, he had to decide, this is something that I need to do to rebuild trust with my wife.
Well, I'd go meet with our pastor, and I would she could call, the idea you could call, and I would have to give them the phone. Hey, this is what I'm actually with this person. And that didn't last for a super long time, but it lasted for long enough. And again, our home, the dynamic that became just especially in the early time, that just kind of became a thing. And then, but you also, so me giving up that stuff, but then just like you said at the very beginning in the introduction, to invite me back in, your willingness to allow me to be part of the family, where, I joke about having opinions. You've been great about let's talk through that. Yeah. And when you're an addict and you're using your whatever, whether it's a chemical or a behavior, you're using it to escape something. Often it's responsibility.
Yeah.
Often it's tension. And sometimes those conversations are tense and there's conflict. And again, I talk about being stunted for 15 years. We had to learn how to have healthy conflict.
Yes.
We had to learn how to discuss something without it being fearful and bringing up the past all the time or hiding from the past all the time. And so that dynamic of being able to talk about this stuff, we talk about this. Sometimes people are a little freaked out by us because I think in the recovery home, and I hope this is true for people watching this, that the recovery home, one of the things is we talk about stuff like this and it doesn't freak us out.
Yeah.
And sometimes we'll be talking to somebody and you can tell, they're not comfortable with us
being so honest about it.
And not that that's a virtue. Sometimes we probably should realize, that's, you know what?
TMI, people.
So.
You were talking about responsibility.
Okay.
But I also, on that also, one thing that was very helpful was while he was being accountable in a lot of areas where he was choosing that as, some people will say, yeah, of course, duh, he has to do that. But when you think about it, you're your own person and you're making an individual choice that this is what I'm going to do. And it's humbling to have every second of your day accounted for and every penny that you spend. It is humbling. But at the same time, one of the other things that was really important was my expectations. And it was really important for me not to put on him this level of expectation that he was going to suddenly, now that he was clean, become super dad and super husband.
The same things that were masked by the pills suddenly would come out. So one of the big ones is I'm emotional. The pills, especially Tramadol, man, that leveled me out. And so emotionally, I think I talked about this last time, I get emotional. Well, now also, so suddenly I'd be angry about things where for a long time I just never got angry.
No, nothing. Yeah.
Or I can be irritated unreasonably sometimes, not often, but sometimes. Gets his feelings hurt, gets angry, cries for no reason, just needs a hug. Not really.
So back to unreasonable expectations. So there were some things that were really, really important for him. Like, for example, he needed to go to recovery meetings every week. He had accountability meetings. He met with our pastor. All of those things took time away from family time.
Oh, yeah.
And I had to be very, I had to let go of some of those things. Because especially in the beginning when he really needed so much accountability, so many recovery meetings. From
somebody not you.
Right.
Like one of the dynamics of our home had to change. She had to quit being the police. I had to have other people to hold me accountable.
Right.
So yeah.
Yeah, so I wasn't the one asking him. I mean, I had the comfort of him handing me receipts or knowing he wasn't alone or knowing that he was clocking in and out of work. But as far as how are you doing in your recovery, how are you doing, all that he was reporting all that to someone else, not me. My expectation needed to be reasonable of, look, he's barely holding it together for the next 15 minutes.
Right.
So to expect him to remember that it's so-and-so's birthday or that, can you read to the kids tonight? I would have to ask him those things or say those things and be reasonable about it rather than just having this unspoken expectation of you're fixed and you need to be responsible now and you need to shoulder all this responsibility that you've been, bucking for all of these years. Now you're fixed. Now do it all. And honestly, I think the pairing of those two things, of his willingness to be accountable and my willingness to say, you need to fix you. Yeah. If you need to fix you and not me, then you need to fix you.
And you did.
Yeah.
I want to end. You can say what you want to end, but I think I said this last time. I love my life. It's totally true. I mean, I love our life, and so those first few years were really hard and humbling at times and difficult, and we had conflicts learning that stuff, and it's not perfect by any stretch, but so much better. And that we've gotten to the place where we can have conflict, where we can trust each other, where you're not trying to fix, and I don't need as much fixing. But our home is, it's worthy of a stencil now. I mean, it's stencil worthy. It does get better, and it's worth those, changing those behaviors, changing those routines, changing those expectations, and going through even some, extremes on one end to get to the end where it's better. And so home is this, I was saying, when I see home though in a recovery, to have a safe place where people think the best, and where you can struggle with stuff and be loved still and be a part of it, is just an amazing thing.
It was really important while I was being honest, and while we were being honest with the kids, it was really important for me to remember, he's still their dad. That I wasn't saying things to them about what a horrible person he was, that because they needed to keep that relationship. If that was ever going to heal, they couldn't go into the parent-child relationship with all this baggage of mom, and all the negative things that I could have said, I guess, about him in front of them. And so as much as possible, as much was humanly possible, even in the middle of being honest, and being honest about very hard things like, dad really screwed up, or, that saying that, but not saying, man, he's such a loser, your dad, blah, 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 just ranting about it. That was not a healing thing to do in our relationship. I had some great examples of people who had healthy responses to their spouse's issues, even people who had been divorced, who treated their ex respectfully. It was a pattern that I knew and could see from example, that you can't tear down that relationship that your kid has with their parent. So not that I was perfect at it,
but you've done amazing. I will say this, as far as the home, one thing I've always known about that Deb has done, and so this is a little challenge. Dignity is this huge piece to recovery to me. Offering someone who's struggling, no matter how far down they've gone, offering dignity. And you've always protected my dignity. Important thing to remember, to the kids or to the outside world, that your home does need to be safe, and we need to protect that. Not to project a false image or anything, or that everything's great. You can talk about struggling, but you don't need to add that baggage of, and also he's a jerk. So, so you've done good at that.
Thank you. It's because I love you.
Oh.
And also always did. I mean, I guess that's the thing. It comes right down to that, is that I loved him, and my hope for our home and for our relationship was that it would heal. And so everything that I could do to help it heal, as much as was in my power, that's what I wanted. That's what I wanted to do.
Thank you.
Does that make you happy?
That does make me happy.
Does it make you feel loved? Make you feel like we have a home?
And it is. Our home is filled with love.
Always, constantly.
That feels like a plaque. Thank you.
Thanks. Okay.